getting to do some thinking about our own leadership strengths and how we can maybe improve and grow as leaders. So I always love this particular session because we tend to have different leadership gurus from different fields come in, and I always learn so much. And so this morning, got ahead of myself, we're fortunate to have Professor Jeannette Roberts, who is a professor of pharmaceutical sciences in the School of Pharmacy, and she served as a truly beloved dean at that school for 11 years. So she got a huge dose of leadership. She was also the catalyst for the campus-wide growth of our Global Health Institute and how to navigate some pretty tricky waters for that. And she is going off to do a leadership-related fellowship with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation next year in Washington, D.C. Next week. Well, it's next year for us, but it's next week for her. So you'll all have a friend in D.C. next year, as well as many friends here in Madison. So with that, and I'll invite Jeannette to tell us more. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Lori. It's an absolute pleasure. Should I try to focus on the mic or not necessarily? Okay.
So, and we do have if you prefer to
Wander?
we have a clip mic if you prefer that.
I think I will use that. So did you guys run into any students on campus today? Moving in? Busy. You think of Madison as a rather small city, but when the university's in session, it turns into something entirely different. Okay. These are always set up for men's clothing, but I digress. Okay, so we're going to walk through a number of steps leading up to a discussion surrounding the Strengths Finder concept. Have you run into this before? Anybody? Okay. So I'll do a little backstory, and then we'll work through the instrument that you hopefully had a chance to self-administer on the web. And if you didn't, that's not fatal at all, but we'll talk about some general concepts as well as hopefully apply that directly to your skill set and then how it applies to leadership. So I'm going to work through a number of books. I actually like to hold a real book, and I brought some that you can peruse as we go. I believe this whole movement, and I use that term purposefully, started with the concept of emotional intelligence, or the EQ, emotional quotient. Just like the IQ, intelligence quotient, this is sort of a parallel concept that isn't just about smarts, knowledge, content, but about how you approach people, how you deal with others, how you apply your skills in interpersonal relationships. We'll talk about the Strengths Finder tool per se. I have a little individual and group work dispersed through. And then we'll go into how this applies to leadership and how it applies to building strong teams, which you've had some content this week about. And so I hope this is generally useful. It's not only applicable to the healthcare world, but as we move into more team-based care and so forth, it really is applying very pointedly in the healthcare environment. So the objectives today are to define emotional intelligence and how this applies in the workplace, what features especially apply to the workplace. Talk about team emotional and social intelligence. The term social intelligence is the newest of all, and it's just, again, about how you approach people, how you understand others, and obviously to exert leadership, therefore, and have quality teams and quality outcomes. We'll talk about the Strengths Finder tool and the strengths that you identified for yourself, and then group them. Lori mentioned this before. This is a relatively new spin on the Strengths Finders, group them into the four domains of leadership, and we'll see how that works. And then hopefully give you a bit of new understanding and appreciation for qualities of leadership, and again, understanding individual strengths, building strong teams. So again, this all started back in 1995 with the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. There is an Emotional Intelligence 2.0 version now. I have not read that yet, but I should. The Dalai Lama is quoted, so it's got to be good. But again, this is all about how you approach interpersonal interactions and how you can apply these concepts to leadership. So if we look on the website about emotional intelligence, it's no surprise that there are 25 apps that pop up on your phone if you search for emotional intelligence, all kinds of things that can provide guidance and questions, how would you approach certain situations. But in terms of some data points, when measuring top performers in whatever sphere that people are in, 90% are identified as having high emotional intelligence. So that doesn't mean you can't be a leader if you don't appreciate these features, but the real top performers have come to learn these concepts and apply them in their leaderships. The emotional quotient, or EQ, is actually responsible for more than half of everyone's job performance, which is kind of an interesting thing to think of. Again, we're taught to look for smart people and apply intelligence and so forth, but it's really the social skill, the softer skills, some people call them, that account for so much of people's performance. And people with high emotional quotient even make more money. So that's a pretty good driving force as well. And there's a website you can refer to if you'd like to explore that some more. There is a tool to appraise individual emotional intelligence. I didn't have you take that because, we're doing all kinds of stuff. But if you want to explore that, use it for yourself, for your team, here's a website where you can actually appraise and get a score for your emotional intelligence. So Daniel Goleman also wrote a wonderful paper in the Harvard Business Review some years ago about what makes a leader. And he sort of built on the work of the emotional intelligence individually to talk about what happens in the workplace and what features are important. And so I thought I'd provide you that table. So this is the essence of Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence, especially as it applies to the workplace. So he divides it into these 5 components: self-awareness, which is the ability to recognize and understand your moods, emotions, and drives, as well as the effect of yourself on others. So it's just, again, we all know people who behave in certain ways, and it's obvious that they're not thinking of their impact on others, and having no sense of themselves. But this leads to features of self-confidence, very realistic self-assessment, not some grandiose made-up thing about yourself. And also the self-deprecating sense of humor is always a feature there. The self-regulation, I think, is probably my favorite. Again, how many times have we interacted with colleagues who have no filters? They just say and behave, just say things, and it's like, whoa, what's the word? Turn on brain before engaging mouth kind of a thing. And these people can't do that. So control or redirect your own disruptive impulses. So it's largely unproductive to slam people generally. And so redirect that impulse to more productive way of handling people. So this leads to feelings of trust and integrity between people. The comfort with ambiguity is, I think the first thing I learned as dean, you have to be comfortable with ambiguity, at least at UW, and openness to change. So it's you kind of have to add this, again, self-awareness coupled with the regulation piece. Motivation is another important theme that comes out of emotional intelligence. You got to have a passion. If you're not doing what you love, you better do something else, because you just can't maintain that energy that's necessary. And again, persistence is a strong thing. So you want people with motivation want to achieve. They're very optimistic and committed. So those are great features. Empathy, of course, is the ability to understand what other people are feeling and needing, and adjust your own behavior based on what you're seeing in others. Building talent, having cross-cultural sensitivity, and so forth is a sense of service. Service leadership is another newer term. Servant leadership that brings in those features of not leading to make yourself great. It's to assist others and serve your clients and customers. And of course, a set of social skills, managing relationship, building networks. It's always good. Lots of input, being persuasive, and leading change. And that's, again, a huge theme this week. So the whole StrengthsFinder movement, per se, that I attribute a lot to the emotional intelligence work, came out of a set of publications back starting in 1999, which started with first break all the rules. So just guidance about being willing to take risks, apply knowledge in new and different ways, and this is kind of the start of the innovation movement there. So that's kind of where all this started back, again, quite a few years ago now. That was followed by, so first break all the rules, now discover your strengths. And this is where the StrengthsFinder came from. So this is considered StrengthsFinder's 1.0. And it talks a lot about just the basic principle. So one reason that I like this whole thing so much is it's very positive and uplifting and optimistic. So we all get asked in job interviews or whatever, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And it's kind of an uncomfortable question usually. There's a sense of focusing on our weaknesses. So you have a kid in school, they come home with a report card with an A in English and a D in math. What are you focusing on? Probably the D, right? Oh, we gotta figure that out. And of course, we do. It's not that you ignore things that you need to work on more, but you can get far further ahead in many respects if you focus on the strengths and hone in that case, on the child's proficiency with English and writing and poetry or whatever, and finding that sweet spot for their future. So that's kind of the basic principle behind the StrengthsFinder. So it's find your strengths, focus on those. We all also know that 20% of the people we work with take 80% of our time, usually in a negative way, right? And so if you think you're going to move the outliers closer to you, to the middle, good morning. That takes a lot of time and energy that may not get you anywhere. So should you then focus more on the people in your sort of camp to begin with and move forward and get the people closer to you? So it's a big argument, but this evolved into the StrengthsFinder 2.0, which is the tool that still exists. You used to have to buy a book. Now, as you know, you can go online and sign up for this assessment. It's all around 34 attributes that the assessment tool sorts out by answering different questions as you go through the exercise. This has been done by the Gallup people here in the States. Gallup is famous for their surveys about everything. They survey about presidential elections and health of the community, everything. They are the survey experts. And they've put that expertise behind the StrengthsFinder and have come up with ways to analyze people's answers to that exercise and all kinds of weird algorithms that pump out then your five strengths out of the list of 34 possible attributes. This has so much statistical power and research behind it. It's just solid, and it's amazing. I'll use my own personal example about how strong I think this is. I've now taken the StrengthsFinder tool 3 times since, I don't know, the early 2000s, I guess, or middle 2000s. And my 5 strengths, all 3 times, came out the same and in the same order. So, and in the same confident about this, how this is done. And again, they have a lot of expertise behind data analysis and survey instruments and so forth. So I really think they've got this nailed down. And so if you had a chance to look on the website, you'll notice the 34 attributes that they group. Everything from competitiveness to all kinds of stuff. And it's not that any of them are good or bad. It's just what your strengths are. And some people are surprised by what pops up. But that's pretty rare because it's like, oh yeah, I see myself in that list. Yeah. So my top strengths, I even have my little display here that I was given during one of the exercises. So I'm achiever, learner, woo, ideation, and input. Woo stands for winning over others, persuasiveness, things like that, which I think is my best attribute for being a dean. I just thought that was really good. So this just happens to be my 5 strengths. And again, I hope several of you have had a chance to do this. Yes? A couple people. Okay. So on the worksheet that I passed out earlier, this one page, I want you to take a moment to write down the 5 strengths that popped up in your exercise. Does everybody have those? Or hopefully in your... What should happen when you take this tool, use this tool, is you get the 5 strengths and you get a customized explanation of how they work for you. And so even if somebody has the same top strength, the analysis that you receive will be different depending on the other top 5. So it really is customized to your responses, which, of course, makes it more powerful. So take a moment to write down your strengths, and then the whole point is to use these strengths. So if we're talking about the workplace, and if you could indicate one activity in your daily life, your work week, that plays to that strength, to see if you are really in a place that allows you to utilize that set of strengths. So just take a moment. If you didn't do it, it's not a big deal. But and we'll get to the lower part of that sheet in a few minutes. It's just the top table that I'd like you to fill out. Sure. Does everybody have one? Do you have a worksheet? I left one there. Okay. So I believe all of our international visitors received a code to do this, right? At no charge. It's $9.99, otherwise dollars online. And if you have a code and didn't do it this week, they can still use that, right? And
yeah. How many people got a chance to do it? Raise your hand. 5. Okay, so everybody did it. How many people got their printout, were able to print it and read what it said about you?
it should be in your email, right? You should have a customized printout.
How many people got that email that they sent to you with the result? Raise your hand if you got it. Did you have a chance to read it?
Not the full results. They say that they are just saying 5.
5, yeah.
And then if you want to access full, then you have to again.
Right.
Right, but it should have, again, a customized description for your set.
Yes, so that's what I have written out here. So the
Yeah.
5 are pretty short.
Right,
And so
right.
if you're finding trouble remembering, open your email and you can read the paragraph on each one.
Yeah, there's just a set of 5 and then a short paragraph that,
And that's a lot. Those are pretty good. That's a lot to go on for today.
I don't know how this is supposed to work, but I definitely did not get an email with the 5 in an email. But if I log on to the StrengthsFinder
okay.
website,
That's
with my
okay.
thing, then I can
Just did it a different way. So if you
They've changed the pattern. Yeah.
so some people did it on their own if they were buying it.
Got it. Okay. So try again. You should have a login and so forth if you have didn't scribble down your 5 strengths, but hopefully you can access it one way or another. That was the point. Lorella, did you log in to the website or did you get an email?
And then I found a link where you could get your results, the printout,
Uh-huh.
in a PDF file.
Okay, yeah,
And then I saved that to my computer
Great,
and I
okay.
can print that.
got it? Okay, yeah. Again, they've changed it over the years, so I haven't done it for a while. Getting more sophisticated, of course. So let's just see what people's top strengths turned out to be. Anybody want to volunteer? Number 1? Harmony. Interesting. That's a handy one. I do not have harmony, as you can see. Others? Connectedness. Very good. Very good emotional intelligence feature there. Yeah. Futuristic. Yeah. Again, it's all. What about you, Tricia? Learner. Well, those of us in an academic environment largely should have that. Yeah. Focused. Okay. So we're getting these features. Caitlin. Relator is another great one. Well, they're all good. Yeah. Huh? Consistency? Say again? Activator. Ooh. Catalyst. I like that one. Yeah, again, there's nothing good or bad or wrong or right. It's just a feature of your personality, the way that you operate, the way you relate to people. So, again, the whole point of this little table, though, is to see if there's a cohesion between your strengths and what you do at work. And if not, change something because you won't be at your best. Okay, so this has then morphed over the years into applying the StrengthsFinder idea and focusing on your strengths for individual work to strengths-based leadership, which I think is a no-brainer. Now it's like, why didn't I think of this stuff? So there's a whole other book that came out in 2008 from some of the original authors of the StrengthsFinder about applying this to leadership situations. So if we think about the 4 domains of leadership, they have been defined as executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. So they've clustered the 34 different strengths within these 4 attributes of leadership. So was this included in this exercise? Sometimes okay. I get some yeses and some nos.
Yeah, the printout, they put them under the category.
Okay, so that's what I want us to do next. So you can see the executing are arranged there. Influencing, relationship building, strategic thinking. So you can kind of see where this goes. Like under the influencing category, you have the activator, communication, all those that influence people to behave in a certain way. You got the woo there, and then the strategic thinking is fairly logical, you're analytical, you're futuristic, So this is kind of a way to think about how, based on your strength profile, how you might approach leadership, decision-making, and behaviors. So I'd like you to take your 5 top strengths and build your own little table if it wasn't included in your results. And go back to this one to pick and choose where you have strengths in executing, influencing, relationship building, or strategic thinking. Does that make sense? So look for your strengths and just see what domains of leadership they fall within. And write it down. Mm-hmm. So what we're shooting for here is seeing where your strengths are grouping, right? Where the majority of your strengths apply. Sometimes it's not that obvious, but other times it's very obvious. Okay, kind of getting organized there. Okay. Good shape? So these are my 5 strengths clustered into the domains of leadership. So I have 1 each in executing and influencing, but 3 clustered in strategic thinking. So that gives you some sense for how you might operate and so on. So what I want you to do now is identify which of the 4 domains of leadership that you have clustered in the most. Okay? If you have a tie, I would ask you to self-select one or the other based on how you feel that you largely operate. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, and then I want you to parade up here and pick up the appropriate colored thing based on your main domain of leadership strength. Okay, so strategic thinking, executing is orange, relationship building blue, and influencing yellow. Okay, so just let's head this way, and we'll just walk around and pick up the appropriate colored tag based on where your strengths clustered the most. And again, if you have a tie, you have to self-select one that you think explains your approach and behavior more than others. So just come on, filter down.
If such and so is a strength for you, if such and so is one of your lesser strengths, that's something you have to pay extra to find out? Or-
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I just want to make sure that wasn't somewhere else.
No, I don't know why they charge more for that, but they do. So. Not a surprise. Okay, are we good? So now I want to do a little group work exercise. And what I'm going to ask you to do is have the blue relationship building group cluster back by Warren, the strategic thinking purple group cluster up here, the yellow influencing group cluster up here, and the orange executing group cluster in the back. Does that make sense? So leave your stuff. We'll be just standing and talking for a little bit.
I'll let you give some more direction. Were you going to give more direction?
I'll let them move around.
So I'm curious because I have the majority strategic thinking, but I feel like when I reflect on my work that I do, like at the VA, and hear that I use more of this during my daily activities. How do you think about that? Is that maybe not necessarily true?
I would go with the clustering at this point.
Yes, I would. I'm just reflecting in general on this.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad there's some cohesion there. So.
And it could be too that you're not in the place where all your leadership is.
Okay, purple, strategic thinking, blue, relationship building, orange, executing, yellow, influencing. We only have one yellow? Okay, so, heads up. So I want you to talk within your like-minded group about a conflict situation in the workplace. So there's two people in your office that you supervise, and you are responsible for them and their work, and they just can't be in the same room together at this point. So how would you approach that situation to resolve that conflict? So I just want you to talk with each other and see how you would go about fixing that conflict. I'll just spend a few minutes talking within your groups. Yes, we have no yellows. Huh.
Or like have a group conversation about what a positive work environment should look like. And then have a way to kind of play down the rules on how to have that.
Oh, sorry. It's fun.
I need to work on making sure all my emails. I always say when I'm on vacation,
Hours later.
or
Days later. Well, email will be the death of all of us. Yeah, you know. Or you need a name or something. Yeah, I do that all the time. Our email, the new email system, only, when you search for something, it only goes back a little ways. I don't know how to access older stuff, and it's like, yeah, whatever. Whatever works. My new development director who I joined the school 3 years ago, or now, or so now. He has a clean inbox every day. Really? Oh, that was back when I worked with him. No, it's been a while, so maybe, that's not. How we doing? We got some sense for how you would work on this conflict in your workplace? Still problem solving? I'll give you a few more minutes. Do you want the whole list again?
What's the next question?
Just wondered if you need more information. Okay, so let's come back to the center here, and I'd like to have each group briefly summarize their approaches to resolve this situation of conflict in your workplace. How about the strategic thinkers?
We thought it would be
Hang on. Make sure everybody can hear you.
okay. We approach this in different ways. Number one, we thought about what the underlying problem might be. It might be different things, like maybe the supervisor is creating a competitive environment, or maybe it is possible that the two people are focusing on the wrong thing, on their differences rather than on their similarities. So it was suggested that we discuss to each of them first individually, and then try to find a common ground for their discussion together. And also, it was suggested that sometimes for little kids we can say, go and do something together. So that might work.
Lock them in the same room.
No, it's not like that. It's not like that. Maybe Lori can explain it better than me.
I was just saying I had a work experience early on when I was working in Honduras, and there were two young people who just wouldn't get along, and I gave them one bill, but I told them they could have ice cream, but there was just one bill, so they had to go together, purchase it together, eat it together, and bring me the change. And making them do something together, something fun together, worked. I don't know that would work in this situation, but we laughed about it.
Okay. Now, other comments from the strategic thinking group? Okay, you see kind of the outline, a step-by-step process here, investigating the background, moving forward in a stepwise, logical fashion. Very, very strategic thinking. So the relationship building group, how did you approach solving this conflict in the workplace? Anybody have some thoughts? The big guy. Nominated.
I think first we should understand the problem is, and I think we should listen to both the person, because they might be having their own opinion, and then we have to differentiate between what is the fact and what is the interpretation, because the fact will be the same thing, but the interpretation might be a different thing. So we have to respect to each individual's opinion, and then come to a decision. And ultimately, we have to keep the bigger goal in mind. And when you are working in an environment, I think majority of us has the common goal. So we should not miss the common goal. So we have to remind them about the common goal. And what else? Another thing is the no blame, and not being judgmental about it. So we have to think with an unbiased mind. Anything else to be added on?
Do you see some of the more emphasis on the relationship building idea, the interpersonal relationships, how you need to understand and mutually move forward?
One more thing, I think we should also think from the other people's perspective also, because when you are working in the group, I think I see my problems only, and the other person sees his problem only. Sometimes I should sit in that person's shoe and think, if I'm that person, what problem I'll be facing. So if I have this thing, we'll have a holistic view about the problem. Yeah.
Look at the elements of emotional intelligence there, the self-awareness and so forth. So obviously some of the same features, but different fundamental approach and way of thinking about things. How about the executing group? Any thoughts? Warren, you in charge?
I'm first, I guess.
You're closest.
So I think we looked at it as what is the objective, and then working our way back, thinking how do you get the work done, in the executive domain. So we thought there were maybe two avenues to approach, and given the different situations. So having the two work together with some kind of mediator involved to help to move the conflict forward, and then obtain the objective that we wanted to get done. And the second was if there's a way to split the groups apart, have them work independently to still come to a common reason of achieving the goal of the project.
Other comments?
Yeah, there's a common comment. The first thing that we have two steps. One first step is to make them work together by counseling them or know what are the conflicts they have, and then try to resolve that and then work together to reach that goal. Otherwise, if they can't come together, then separate them for the different responsibilities so that they can work on different group, but make them that our common goals should be fulfilled at any cost. Thank you.
You see the more sort of action there? You know, you're executing. Yeah, this group often gets fire them at any cost. Yes, that was key. We have no yellow influencers, apparently. That's not unusual. Usually have a couple in a group this size. But so the whole point was just to illustrate how your strengths lead you to approach situations in slightly different ways. And again, there's no right or wrong, but it's an appreciation of what you bring, how you think, and how, again, you're applying it in a leadership role to a conflict situation in your workplace. And, of course, personnel and conflict is what leaders deal with all the time. I don't have to tell you that. So I hope you enjoyed that little exercise. So why don't you go ahead and come back to your seats, and we'll spend a few more minutes on some other things. So I'd like to return to the worksheet now just briefly. And down to the bottom part where there's a set of 3 questions. And I'd just like to focus on the top 2. Is this thing on? Oh, okay. The top 2 questions, again, just to focus your attention on your work life. What do you enjoy the most about what you do? Either as educators or healthcare providers, there's a lot of common features. And then just, again, reflect a little bit on if that particular feature of what you enjoy the most plays to the strengths that we were just dealing with. And is there a way to more intentionally focus on your strengths in the workplace? Again, it's hard to divide work and home sometimes, and you completely turn into another person after a day of slaving away and so forth. But focus on your work life and just spend a couple minutes answering these 2 questions, just again to reflect on the strengths and what you do most of the time at work and what do you love the most. People want to volunteer what they love the most about their role at work? Yeah, please.
I really enjoy working with patients. Going to clinic, hours pass by a lot faster, and then I enjoy applying what I've learned to the particular problem and coming to help improve the health of each patient.
Right. So I presume that that's a fairly common thread among the healthcare practitioners. Yeah. Thank you.
What I enjoy most about my work is that I'm able to help my patients. They come in with some pain, and when they leave more without a pain, or when they feel much better and they leave, and that gives me a good job satisfaction.
Certainly. Great. Other thoughts? Yeah. Laura.
My top three were strategic, ideation, and futuristic. So what I love about what I'm doing as a fellow is I'm coming up with strategic plans for research projects and different ideas of approaching them and being very futuristic about the potential outcomes of them and communicating that with others.
I'd say you're playing to your strengths. Yeah. Other features of your work life that get you up in the morning that you really love. Yeah, Caitlin.
I'm doing a research project where we're collaborating with a lab in engineering, and I work in infection prevention, so it's nice being able to talk to them, and also we're working with like environmental services and nursing and medical. So as far as related relationships, got a lot of different perspectives from people.
Very nice. Are you finding that what you identified that you love about your work is in fact aligning with your strengths? Okay. That's good. And again, if that's not happening, you're not going to change who you are, but you can change the work you do and align that strength with actual activities that mutually reinforce each other, and you'll be a happier person. So, well, thank you for thinking about that a little bit. I just wanted to spend a little more time on a couple things. One is, again, a newer concept that's come out of all of this, and that is applying emotional and social intelligence to team building and teamwork. And again, in the healthcare domain, well, all work life these days is really all about teams and collaboration and bringing individual strengths to the team. And that's what this tool can allow you to do. So if you think about it in terms of building a team for a certain project, patient care or making a product or whatever you might conceive of, and if you know the strengths of your people, you can construct a well-functioning, strong team by having multiple kinds of strength in that team. And you have to have different ideas. You have to have diverse inputs and points of view, or else you don't make quality decisions. So this is a way to intentionally think about the teams you're building depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So again, one of the newer kind of concepts, the social intelligence, and applying these things not to an individual, but to team building. So the major themes around this sort of high-functioning teams has been delineated in this way. So first of all, the first important thing is having a team identity. If you don't know what you're about, you're not going to get anywhere. Right? So you have to have clear goals and a group think sense. And I mean that in a good way. Again, the concept of motivation. People have to be passionate about what they're doing. They have to care about it. It has to be important to them, bringing that element of motivation. The emotional awareness within a team, huge, absolutely huge, to have those elements of self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation called out again, so forth. The ability to communicate effectively within the team. I think we've all been in situations where that clearly wasn't happening. And you come out of a meeting, think you agree on something, and then the next step is completely divergent from what was discussed, kind of. And I mean, sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's very dramatic, and you think, what meeting was I at? You know, I must have been a different universe or something. So that effective communication, never assume anything. Never assume that people heard the first time. Multiple discussion. You can never over-communicate is one thing that I say, and that's certainly within an effective team. The level of stress tolerance of the team. I'm not talking about individuals here. It's the stress tolerance of the team together that can be a real predictor of effectiveness and positive outcomes and progress. The ability to resolve conflict. I mean, people have conflicts with each other. You know, get over it. And you're going to deal with this all the time if you're leading a team, if you're in any leadership role or as a member, per se. You have to be able to sit down, talk to each other, and resolve these conflicts and move forward. One of the ways I put it is to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So a conflict is not a comfortable situation, right? People have different points of view. They're just, at each other's throats. This is not productive. So you have to be comfortable mediating, bringing those conflicts to a resolution. Easier said than done sometimes. And the sense of positivity, I mentioned as underlying the Strengths Finder concept. This optimism, this sense of positive movement and contribution is huge. So these are the major themes that have emerged to an effective team. And that's the way you sustain productivity, generate trust, and make higher quality decisions. Very important stuff. So I just wanted you to address question number 3 on the worksheet there, talking about a team that you're engaged with at work and whether, a little compartmentalized, one little group, one little team, committee, whatever you want to define it, healthcare provider team, and does your role on that team, everybody really contributes in different ways, does your role in that team again, play to the strengths that you're bringing? And do you know about other people's strengths? Sometimes you don't have to take a tool to understand that this person is a communicator, and this person is a empathizer, and so forth. But what would it be helpful in this team situation to know about your colleagues to make it a more high-functioning productive team situation? So I'll just give you a couple minutes to mull over that. The VA, this is the Veterans Administration. It's a federal government-funded program of health care for people who have served in the military. And you never expect the federal government to get something right, really. But a lot of features of the VA they've gotten right. So anyway, so if we talk about, again, strength-based leadership, applying this when you're in a team situation, leading a team of some kind, there's 3 features that have popped out of a lot of this study and research. One is the most effective leaders are always investing in individual, therefore collective strengths. So it's about building your human capital. It's about expanding the horizons of the people you work with and for. And that investment in human capital is so key. So any opportunity, it doesn't have to be monetary even, just time and mentoring or other features, but it's that investment in the strengths of others that is so important. The most effective leaders surround themselves with the right people and maximize their team. So it's not about the leader shining brightly, more brightly than everybody else. It's about building these teams with the right people. So one of my theories is you always hire smarter people than you and bring them together in effective teams. And, that's how you maximize everybody's efforts, move the organization forward. And the most effective leaders understand their followers' needs. Again, back to the concepts of emotional intelligence and self-awareness and empathy and so forth. And the 4 features that come up time and time again to make an effective leader are trust, compassion, stability, and hope. You have to be able to provide that sense of hope to the group. It has to be stable. This chaos that we all operate in right now is really not good. And the trust piece, it's so easy to lose the trust of people around you. Very difficult to build that trust. There's a great book called The Speed of Trust about individuals and organizations that I would highly recommend. And if you don't have that fundamental sense of trust, if you're the leader of the operation has no capacity to build that trust within the team, nothing's going to work. So, again, just a couple words about leadership. And then I thought I'd end with my personal list of leadership characteristics, my 7 C's of leadership, as I call them. So, first of all, you do have to demonstrate competence to those you are leading. If people don't think that you have the experience or expertise to take on a particular role, it's going to be very difficult to convince them of that. I think we've seen this crisis of leadership with people making up their credentials. You know, they falsify their resumes to include degrees that they don't have and so forth. And because they feel that that will demonstrate competence, but of course, when people figure out that this is not true, it kind of goes quickly. So don't lie. That's one concern. But you have to be viewed as competent. I remember when I came here as dean, I had 15 years of academic background as a medicinal chemist. I ran NIH-funded research programs and so on, publications, the whole 9 yards. And the faculty in pharmaceutical sciences asked me to give a research seminar not too long after I came, just to kind of see what I was interested in and so forth. So I gave this seminar about my research interests, which are all about the chemistry and biochemistry of selenium and its role in the body. And about 8 people came up to me after I was done and said, I can't believe that you did all this great work and that you know all this stuff about. And I'm like, why did you hire me? I don't know anything about anything. So it was just kind of comical. But so you have to, in my case, I had to go toe to toe with the faculty and demonstrate that I walk the walk and talk the talk. There's a certain amount of self-confidence that a leader must bring. This is not bragging or that whole thing, but you have to ensure that your followers have confidence in you. The commitment always has to be there, the motivation, the passion, of course. And I've added another C of compassion, particularly about that word, but also, of course, in any healthcare discipline, you have to have that fundamental belief that your work is improving the lives of others. Consistency is a really tough one for me. I put this in terms of consistency of thought, word, and action. And, if you're thinking one thing and saying another thing and acting yet in a third way, that's confusing, that's disingenuous, and it's really difficult. So I had this saying that your stomach says no, but your mouth says yes, as one thing. So that's not a compatible sort of situation. And it's really work, at least for me, to make sure that I did that consistent approach to people in thought, word, and action. Courage, I think, is right up there. The shirtless dancing guy had courage to start that movement, and sometimes it's misplaced courage, but often not. And you do have to be willing to put yourself out there in some respects, I would say intelligently and thoughtfully, but you got to take some risks sometimes, whether it's personal risk with your colleagues, with your operation, with a process. And again, the 7C of communication with everyone, and you cannot over-communicate. So that's just kind of my collection over the years of the C's of leadership, for what that's worth. Just thought I'd share that with you. So that's all I have. I wanted to leave time for questions and discussion. And we have a break coming up, so I would love to open the floor up for any questions or comments about your leadership experience, what you would add to some of the things we've discussed today. Any questions I can help address, perhaps?